Welcome to the Tambellini Group's New Normal in Higher Education. I'm Raechelle Clemmons, and joining me here today is Terah Crews, who is Vice President of Learning Solutions at Guild Education. Welcome, Terah.
Thanks, Ray.
It's so great for you to be here. So we've been hearing a lot about competitive forces in higher education for really quite some time. We heard about it, maybe starting even before MOOCs, but certainly with MOOCs, and they were really hyped as being, maybe particularly disruptive. But for the most part, they didn't live up to that hype. We've also seen Silicon Valley alternatives pop up, and then we've seen national online providers like ASU and SNHU, which is Southern New Hampshire University, emerge. But for the most part, these haven't really threatened traditional higher education institutions. So I guess my question for you is this: is that changing? Or are there new competitive models that are emerging in higher education that institutions should be paying attention to? And if so, how is COVID-19 playing into this trend, if at all?
Yeah, so it's an interesting thing that's happening right now, because I think a lot of the conversation over the last few years has been about like these outside influences that are going to come in and disrupt higher education. We see these outlandish claims of like, all higher education institutions are going to go away, or only 10 or 15 are going to survive. Higher education has proven remarkably resilient. And I think we really have to sort of rethink about competition. I think there's still going to be competition coming from the outside, but actually think about competition from the inside. And this is where I think some interesting and exciting, depending on where you are in the competition, and things that are happening. Those big online players that you mentioned have largely been playing in like white space and just sort of like free roaming. As the for-profit providers went down, they moved in and really sort of owned the market. But with COVID, every institution in the country, whether they like it or not, is having to invest in digital infrastructure. They're cutting money everywhere, but they're pouring money into their digital infrastructure. And for anybody sort of like watching this market, and if I was one of those big institutions, I would be worried. I think we're entering boom times for a lot of those online providers and some of these alternative players. But that boom time is driven by how far behind the rest of higher education is. As higher education invests in, they're not simply going to shut down that digital infrastructure once COVID is over. You better bet they're going to actually continuing forward. So I think as we look at competition models, the interesting thing that's likely to come out of this is all this new investment in digital infrastructure is going to create a lot of new players in the digital online space from these sort of traditional institutions that have dabbled in the past. Mm-hmm. And we're going to look at a world that is less 20 or 30 big gorillas in the room, and we're going to have an environment that's likely going to be hundreds of mid-market and smaller players.
That's really interesting. And you mentioned digital infrastructure. So what role is technology playing in making these new models or new competition possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think technology is driving a lot of it right now. But frankly, the institutions I've seen and I've had conversations with, the primary driving factor is like the strategy behind the technology. What they realize is everybody's just been adding technology for years, like monkey bread. It's like, let's add it on top. And then at some point they look at it and go, none of this really makes a lot sense.
You're breaking my heart right now as a technologist, Terah, right? I just want you to know that.
But like, I think where we're seeing institutions, when it comes to like new technology and technology driving things forward, absolutely, technology is the bedrock of it. But where I see a shift is like institutions actually really paying attention to what is our strategy behind our technology, not just in this little division over here that's online or playing in experimental, but broadly across the institution. So I think while I don't see a lot of schools really investing in innovation right now, although obviously I'm hearing anecdotal, a lot of institutions are trying to keep their heads afloat. When I think about digital infrastructure, when it comes out of this, in some ways it's like the strategy behind the digital infrastructure that will be different. And when you have a large like tier 1 public institutions investing heavily in online education, if I was one of the other big online providers, I would be like thinking about, okay, what am I going to do in 3 years? Like, what's my next thing?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what advice then would you give institutions thinking about how to remain competitive as we head into the future? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, what do you tell their technology leaders? If you're thinking about this strategy behind digital infrastructure, how can they help their institutions prepare for this future?
Yeah, I think we'll separate those out. So with the first, I think there's two. The advice I would give, it varies based on sort of where you are. If you're in the, like, I've been in a happy place with not that many competitors over the past few years, I would tell you now's the time over the next 3 years to not pull back on your innovation, but really start thinking about, how am I investing in innovation? How am I thinking about new markets? And how am I differentiating my institution? And really sort of, I mean, frankly, if we go back 10 years, those that had the foresight to see that online adult serving was going to be the thing, you need to find your next thing. And the good news is you probably have 2 or 3 years to figure it out.
Right.
But all these other players are not going to become, they'll go into the space, but they're not going to be great at it for a little while.
Right.
If you are a newer institution coming into that competitive space and trying to, and I think what presidents I've talked to recently think about, okay, I got to invest in this. How do I make sure like this shifts my institution as a result of this investment? Like, let's turn this pain into a positive. Then I would say, think about, look at the big online players and how they went about this. Look past them just having particular type of courses. What is it that they do really well? How are they servicing students? Think about your sort of whole platform that's enabling you to go online. Also, be really mindful of what the competitive landscape is likely to look like in 3 years, because I think it's very easy to look at this space and go, oh man, if I just invest in some digital online, I could have 20,000 more students or 10,000 more students or whatever. But the same thing's going to be true for you as for the currently big online players. The market's going to be a lot more crowded. You should be building out your plan to focus on differentiators right out of the gate. For the big brands, this is going to be easy because we're seeing some weird sort of consumer and learner behavior that they like. People are leaning on brands a little bit more than they have in the past. But for others, you really have to think about sort of what are the thing that makes you different from everybody else. My advice to technology leaders is, I think that as we think about sort of new technologies, and I think we're gonna like have a renaissance and a really exciting period of new technologies coming in to the space as a result of COVID, because it's just sparking the imagination of people.
So you've just redeemed yourself, just so we're clear.
Okay.
Yeah. So now I'm happy again.
We're in renaissance. Like, the exciting things are coming out of this. Where I would put my money, actually where I am putting my money right now, is on friction reduction. Like anything that I think what we've largely overlooked for learners, and what we're all feeling pain for right now, whether it's like I have books propping up my computer, and I have to like think about my thing. Like, all of us are living in a very uncomfortable place right now, and sometimes more profound than others. Anything that is reducing friction and is helping the learners sort of go through their path with a little less pain is going to be really valuable. And when I look at technologies right now, that's what I'm looking for. And in fact, the analogy I've used within Guild is we think about serving that adult learner. I was an adult learner myself.
I was too.
High school dropout, and in working adult, and got like education benefits. But like, as we think about for the adult learner, the college experience is in engaging all this technology and systems and bureaucracy and process and all these other things. It's a roller coaster. If you're a person who's not 18 to 22, that roller coaster is hardcore Six Flags, and it's going to jerk you around a lot. And there's going to be some great highs, and there's going to be some lows where your heart just sinks into your stomach. And as we think about what new technologies that we're adding, as we think about like, what is our technology infrastructure? What are the tools and services that are built around making us better? I like to think like, well, how do we begin to identify those dips, those pain points, and begin to prop those up? Turn that Six Flags roller coaster into a little bit more like Disney teacups. where, yeah, you're going to get jerked around a little bit, but it's just not quite as painful. So as we think about like for the technology leaders, I'll go back to that differentiation. If you're an existing player, you need to figure out what the next big thing is and how you're differentiated. If you're a new player into the market, figure out how you're going to be differentiated in the long term. If you're a technology leader that's figuring out, okay, what new am I going to add here? Like, I think the next 10 years is all going to be about catching higher education up with the convenience economy and really figuring out what a learner experience and learner experience management means for our industry.
I think I also heard you say on the technology side that it's the digital infrastructure isn't just propping up a big robust LMS. It's really about thinking that about the wraparound student services and experiences as well, in a very sort of centralized is not the word I'm looking for, but in a very seamless sort of a way, right? So it's not like go here to do this and go here to do that and whatever, but it's that whole engaging online experience. Did I hear that correctly?
No, yes. And I think this is the thing that's like keeping me like awake right now. In fact, I have a book on my desk right now on like how design theory has changed our world. As I think about the learners that are coming in today, be them 18 or 42, the learners that are coming in today, everything else around us is seamless. From like the fact that like, when I get my groceries delivered to like anything I want, it's seamless, it's easy, and to the point. And I think that as a society that has changed our expectations of the world and in the way that we consume everything. And education is not a consumable. I'm not saying that our learners are customers. I'm saying they are learners, but they're still bringing in those expectations and those behaviors. So as we think about not just standing up a big LMS, in many ways, that's, it's probably because I've never stood up a big LMS, but that's less intriguing to me than what are that suite of services that are used to really make that experience more seamless. And then, and I think this is the thing that like myself and my team, we're working on is how do we think about constantly keeping that experience fresh? Instead of having one like episodic event, how do we, where we do a user experience, how do we think about building muscle memory around constant learner experience?
So my final question, and it's a bit of a prediction question, it's also a bit of a long one. If we think about higher education in the next 5 years, what do you think we'll see? Are there new models that you think we'll see emerge that we don't yet have today? And how do you think this new normal or the next normal will look? And will it be dramatically different than it is today?
It's interesting. Looking at 5 years out, I think we're going to have new models, but I'm hesitant to say it's going to be the new normal. Because I think we're in this sort of interesting moment of survival. New normal implies that like we're all like swimming fast paced towards a new direction. I think for the majority of us in our personal lives and in our institutions, we're holding our heads above water. So I think we're probably 2 years out from like really interesting, exciting things are happening, but then it takes a while for them to like really take hold. But sort of there's a couple things that I think I see. I'll go back to the beginning is I think digital infrastructure, digital presence, serving new and different and diversified markets, that's just going to be the new normal. And there's going to be a lot of players doing it, and there's going to be a lot of institutions in the space. I think if we see some of what some have predicted mass closures, particularly of small schools, it may balance out higher education, where even though there's more competition, there's more to go around. I hope we don't see those mass closures, but I think that's the reality of the world of 5 years from now is probably going to be a lot more players serving more diversified markets, all of them online in a way that is higher quality, not just remote learning, but actually good distance and digital learning. The interesting thing about new models that's been on my mind is I think we're seeing this recession is different, in part because entire markets are disappearing. In my own city here in Austin, there's been some predictions that it's like 60-70% of our restaurants, clubs, and bars, our service industry, may not survive. Now, a lot of those will come back. in some way, and those entrepreneurs will come back and pound, but it'll take a while to build that market back up. In the meantime, we have massive number of people that need to switch careers because certain markets are doing good, others are just completely crumbling as a result of COVID. With that type of career switch, which we've never really seen before, people need education and reskilling. Now, how many of those people are going to go back and get 4-year degrees? Given the current economic pain, I hope many of them do, because I think it's a great place to weather an economic recession. But the reality is a lot of people are going to need short form education to reskill, realign, and sort of figure out what their next step is. And higher education has been playing around with this, where you call it micro-credential, whatever you want to call it. Higher education has been dabbling in this for a long time. I think this is the time where this becomes the new norm, and this becomes the new standard. In 5 years, will this be like the coin of the realm, the short form education? Probably not. But if we look at what is going to be the trend of the next 10 years, like all the market changes of massive number of people changing careers, looking for some sort of short reskilling to figure out how to switch careers, I think this is the moment for short form education. And I think that in 5 years, we will see new institutions, the same way ASU and Southern New Hampshire sort of rose up and became like the behemoths in online. I think we'll see a lot of new players move into this space. And if we're sitting here having this conversation in 2030, instead of looking back and talking about the snooze and the ASUs of the world, I think they'll still be there and probably playing in this space. There'll probably be a list of 10, 20, or 30 more that figured out how to do this and got really good at helping people change careers. Because we know that was the trend anyways. It's just now it's happening all at once.
Sure. So it's kind of the like I think it's Dickens who said it's the best of times, it's the worst of times, right? So depending on which institutional view you're sitting from, it could be a major boon, or this could be a really scary time for you. Okay, well, I look forward to a conversation with you in 10 years. It's a date. But in the meantime, sounds like, focusing in on digital infrastructure and really thinking about your strategy moving forward is a pretty safe bet for institutions. So thank you for your time, Terah. It was great to talk to you today, and we'll see you next time on The New Normal.
Thank you.